We often look at retention both as a customer and as an employee in different segments, right? And we don't always align on one is really dependent upon the other. And retention isn't a number problem, it's a standards problem. We tend to see why we don't have that retention of customers who are loyal to our workplace, loyal to our organization. They might be convenient for them, but don't we want our customers to choose us more than convenience? The new purpose of business and the future of work must include maximizing human potential.
Welcome to Retention Roadmap, navigating service success for new car dealerships. I'm your host, Bill Springer. Today's podcast is sponsored by DriveSure. DriveSure helps new car dealerships remain the go-to provider for maintenance, tires, and repairs. For information on how DriveSure can help your dealership, go to drivesure.com/dealership solutions. My guest today is Joe Clemente, better known as Coach Joe, Executive Vice President at Traver Connect, with nearly 30 years of experience in automotive retail, including general manager roles and oversight of more than 100 service operations nationwide. Joe has built a reputation as a national thought leader in leadership, performance, and culture. Today, we're going to talk about the human side of retention and how leadership discipline, structure training, and dealership culture ultimately determine whether customers stay loyal over time. So, Joe, welcome to the podcast. Glad you're
Bill,
here.
thank you. Thank you. I'm really happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, our pleasure. Thanks for being here. So let's jump right in, Joe, and talking about kind of retention as a leadership discipline, so to speak. And what role do you find that kind of consistency in leadership plays in terms of long-term customer retention?
Yeah, I love this question, but let me offer a couple of different lenses, if I might. We often look at retention both as a customer and as an employee in different segments, right? And we don't always align on one is really dependent upon the other. And retention isn't a number problem, it's a standards problem. We look at a number and we ask, why are customers leaving, or why might they be going to a different vendor or an independent, if you will. But I think
Right.
there's a better question to ask, Bill, and it's why do they stay? And most leaders treat retention like a report or a dashboard. It's green, it's red, it's yellow. But retention isn't a metric problem, it's a leadership behavior problem. And let's just look at it from the employee side. Gallup's longstanding research points to the same truth over and over. People don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Yeah.
Not because of a dramatic event, right? They don't leave just because of that, but they leave because there's a lack of clarity. And in many cases, the absence of a clear path.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about when the customer experience is affected by the change in employee experience, we tend to see why we don't have that retention of customers who are loyal to our workplace, loyal to our organization. They might be convenient for them, but don't we want our customers to choose us more than convenience? We want them to choose us because they trust, they respect us. And I think even more importantly, there's a connection at the employee level, at the experience level.
Yeah. Yeah. I've often, in my experience, Joe, I've just anecdotally felt that when I look at the retention statistics for clients of our company, those dealerships that typically have the strongest retention numbers also seem to have the strongest employee retention numbers. And I'm hoping you could shed some light on that connection and the impact that it has on customers, the impact that it has on employees, and ultimately the impact it has on the overall performance of the dealership.
When you think about all of the research that's done, McKinsey did a great research on culture and the connection of a strong culture and people. and then that connection to revenue retention. So, what is revenue retention? It's customer retention. Those are directly correlated to one
Sure.
another.
Hmm.
And when you think about the employee, the research constantly points to is their development, is their belonging, is there meaningful work, is there, when we think about someone leaving, it goes way beyond compensation alone. While that is a driver, it's not really the driver of retention. What drives retention is when people feel like they're a part of something greater than themselves. And employees specifically, they really want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And when they can see that client or that customer returning repeatedly, now we have a relationship. It goes well beyond. In my prior life as a general manager of a Honda dealership, we were invited to family parties and birthday celebrations and things of that nature from our customers because we viewed that as a full embodied environment where everyone was at peace, everyone mattered. And when you have low turnover and the customer sees the same face over and over, they know what to expect.
Hmm. Yeah, it really does drive that a stronger level of trust, doesn't it? And which
Yes.
is, I
And
think, the over trust and safety, I think, are really the overwhelming things that we as human beings look for in our connection with other human beings. Can I trust this person? Am I safe around this person? And I think, dealerships are no different. We're all human beings, and that's what we're seeking out.
yeah, and as a doer, the customer has a lot of options. And so, you ever flown and someone says at the end of the flight, "Hey, thank you for flying with us. We know you have lots of choices." To some, we've kind of tuned that out.
Yeah.
And in reality, at a dealership, there are so many different options. When you think about retention, it goes well beyond just an environment. It becomes either transactional or transformational. That's what the culture really drives. Is it built in these small, I call them repeatable moments. And those repeatable moments create an environment where trust is strengthened, right? And trust compounds, but so does neglect.
Hmm. For sure. I'm curious, Joe. We've already spoken a number of times about culture in the first few minutes here. And I think culture can often be one of those things, at least in my mind anyway, that is, you, you know it when you see it, you know it when you feel it, but it's really difficult to define it or describe it. How do you help? Can you help us understand what you mean by culture in general, and maybe within dealerships in particular?
So if we think about culture, it's a living, breathing element. It's the lifeblood of a dealership. And it exists whether you're going to admit it, whether you recognize it or not, right? It
Absolutely.
exists.
Yeah.
And the customers feel that immediately. But so do your employees, so do your team members. They feel the culture, it breathes on its own. So let's put this in a little bit of context. In the service drive in particular, culture is visible in the first few minutes of that engagement. Are processes designed for transactional relationships or are they designed for more transformational relationships? One's built around today's ticket, right? And the other's built around tomorrow's trust. A transactional process optimizes one thing, revenue.
Yeah.
A transformational process is optimize loyalty. Retention and loyalty aren't exactly the same thing. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're not the same thing. And so when we think about how we go from a transactional to a transactional is, hey, how do we maximize the moment we're in right now? Transformational is, how do we earn the next one? How do we keep building on that next visit? We create an experience. And what I would suggest for the dealers that are watching or the partners that are watching is map out your culture. What would that culture say or reveal about your current processes, about the way your team members feel about your organization? Because what they feel, they're manifesting to your customers
Yeah.
every day. As
Yep.
simple as something, Bill, as an inbound phone call. What does that tell the customer your experience is like? Do I get bounced around? Do I get picked up? Do I get answered by multiple people in the business, parts, service? I might get bounced over to the sales department. Everyone cares, and the customer on the one that's calling in really doesn't know you're all busy, right? They can't tell that everyone's busy. They care about themselves. So that initial experience also tells the customer whether or not you value them. Do you value my experience? Is it transactional? Am I just a way to make money? Or is that relationship building for retention, for loyalty? And when you think about it from a customer's perspective, and I think a lot of the research proves this out, that as a customer, we think about reliability and we think about transparency and we think about how do we connect transparency and communication with the reliability of my vehicle. It's all in how it's communicated. And how is it communicated based on the tools that we give our team members, our employees, to effectively communicate? So, Bill, if you come in my service drive and I treat you like a transaction, and my theory is this transaction needs to be maximized for me rather than in a servant mindset, which is let me make the experience great for Bill. And I know the retention is the byproduct of creating that experience.
Right.
Not only will Bill come, but he'll refer others.
Right.
He
Right.
might even bring another car that he owns in the family, right?
Sure.
And we have that trust. That's really where culture displays. And I think I go to a lot of different environments and I see a lot of culture statements on the wall. But culture isn't what's posted on the wall, it's what you're living every day.
It's
It's what
behavior.
you're
Yeah.
manifesting. It's those behaviors, to your
Yeah.
point.
Right. Right. I do want to talk about the customer experience and tools available in 2026 to help enhance that. But before we get to that, I want to just circle back on the culture piece and its impact on employee retention and employee recruitment. How how does a dealership who, let's say, they have a good, pretty firm grasp on what their culture is, hire employees who are in alignment with those values that are part of that culture? Any insights on what you've seen that works well for dealerships in particular?
I think you did a really good job of explaining that because when the team members know what they're hiring for, they know what to look for, what's congruent with that culture. So many times we have to hire for need, right? That's just part of the industry. So when we hire for need, the first thing we should start with is will that person fit within my culture? I'll give you a good example. If that person is coming from another dealership and they're a service advisor, are they leaving because the culture is not right, or are they leaving just because it's money motivated? Now,
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with being money motivated. However, it can be a conflict if that is the only focus of that person. So I would say to anyone listening, hire first and foremost for culture. What do you want that individual to bring to your team to add to your customer experience? And then what are those values that are really important to you? So for many, the importance is drive more revenue, make more money. And that's what they manifest. But if we really value creating a customer experience that brings retention life, builds it into life, then we need to create an environment where our team members are properly developed, they're given the right tools so that they understand the right behaviors that are in alignment with your culture and values.
Yeah.
Be clear about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a mentor a number of years ago say to me that we typically hire based upon skills and experience, and we fire people for who they are. We hire for skills and experience, but we fire them for who they are. And ever since I've heard that, I've tried to reverse that to the largest extent possible, and say, okay, let's hire for a person whose values and are going to fit well in our culture. And if the skills need to be sharpened up, fine, we can do that. But if they fit in with the culture and they have the right attitude, that's going to go a long way towards trying to, because you can't fit somebody whose values and experience don't match up with your culture. It just doesn't. I think we've all learned that in the long run that
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Culture is what you allow, right? So if you
Yeah,
allow behaviors that are somewhat destructive because of a chase in revenue, in other words, and you've probably been on similar calls where, or similar interviews where a person said, "Oh, I hired this amazing technician, best technician I've ever hired," yet in the shop they were the most destructive. Or on the variable side, "Hey, we hired this rock star salesperson, but all we did was create confusion and frustration and anxiety, and he was disruptive or she was disruptive."
yeah,
That's hiring for need, but avoiding the values of that person. So that's why I say I think they're really hand in hand. If you got to hire for need, you hire for the values that that person has and whether or not they fit your culture, and then you give them the proper development and tools to help them be successful. Unfortunately, we use the old plug and play method, right? We hire, we plug them in. Here's the desk, here's the phone, go to it.
yeah,
And that's because we hire based on need. I have to have someone wait on my customer. The reality is, are we thinking about the effects that that person has on our customer?
yeah,
They're the face
yep,
every day. They're
yep,
front facing, and
yep,
that's really important.
for sure. Yeah, not to pat ourselves on the back here, but but I bring this up because it might help others who are listening. Is that one of the things that we did as an organization is that we identified our culture or our values as explicitly as possible, and they're posted on our website under our recruitment section, and they're available for anyone to see. And then when we're interviewing folks, we'll interview them based on our values statement, and just it could be as simple as asking them what resonates with you here. What questions do you have about it? And it really does help. It really does help define whether or not that person is a good fit for the organization. And let's face it, obviously the organization wants a good fit, but the employee needs a good fit too. It's a two-way street. So that's helped us largely in terms of helping not only be more selective, but helping potential employees be more selective about us as well.
Yeah, and those standards are changing. Like the workforce standards are changing and they're changing every day. And the reality is I hope this really resonates with some of your listeners and your dealer audience, but the new purpose of business and the future of work must include maximizing human potential.
Amen. Yeah.
The idea of I work for a paycheck has now changed to what's my purpose, right? The idea of I want to be satisfied at my job has turned to where's my development,
Hmm.
right? How am I getting better and growing? And the old ideology of Bill's my boss versus Bill's my coach. Bill's going to help me develop. And retention is those, as I said earlier, those repeatable moments. That's where it's built, and it's
Yep.
changing every day.
Yep. For sure. In the few minutes we have left, Joe, I do want to make sure we come back to that customer experience question. But you brought up the the topic of training, and I'd like to get your input on in terms of um, training and the best way for it to have a long-term impact on the employee and on the organization. In your experience, Joe, what's the difference between structured training and just, a one-off event-based training, and why does that matter for customer retention?
Thank you. I love that question. There is a very big difference between training and development. I'll try to really wrap this up very quickly, but training is like a workshop, it's a meeting, it's a motivational push. It's like, here's the assigned course, check the box. We're compliant. People, they leave energized, but then real happens, reality sets in, pressure happens, and old habits win over. Why? Because they're not achievable behaviors. They're lessons in a moment. They're time stamped. They're momentarily. That's not development. Development is not compliance, and compliance doesn't change the behavior. I always say learning development is not about changing opinions. It's about changing behavior. Because once you can change the behavior, change the person. Change the person, and the behavior and the results compound as a result.
Hmm.
And there's real comprehension, there's research around it, why people can't retain that one-off training event.
Yeah. And what do you find as being the number one reason for that lack of retention on the number one training event? Is it reinforcement? Is it what is
Yeah,
it?
it's reinforcement and it's competencies, how it applies in a live stressful moment. Because when we can go to a behavior that comes natural, then we're not leaning on old habits. We then change the behavior and the outcome. Those behaviors are like things that I really talk about often is relevance, repetition, and reflection. And the more times that we can go back to those competencies and reinforce them, the more likely the person is to change their behavior. And learning and development shows up the most when it is more than just information. It's it's live coaching, it's environmental change, right? And that's structural. A event is training. Hey, go to this seminar. But reality is science tells us we don't retain any of that information a day later.
Yeah.
Take it out
Yeah.
a month and it's less than 10% that we actually retain. That's why learning and development is an investment.
Yeah.
And if you want to invest in the outcome, meaning more revenue, more growth, more retention, you have to invest in development. It's an operational priority. I would say to anyone listening.
Let's talk about the customer experience issue. The customer experience in 2026 can be very different than it was even a few years ago. A few weeks ago, back in NADA, I was doing a workshop on customer retention, and one of the things that I brought up was just the impact of, for example, video inspections on the level of customer trust. And an- and customers love them. They give great feedback. And oh, by the way, it does help from a transactional standpoint
Right? Yes.
too. But how have you seen the customer experience change, and how what changes, from a say a service advisor level, do you think are really critical looking forward, for a dealership to really be able to leverage technology like that, or anything else that has changed in them with respect to the customer experience?
So post COVID, right? The key takeaways is how technology is used, how we communicate, the style with which we communicate, the level of detail that we communicate, and ultimately that customer experience is on their cell phone, right? They have options. And so when you're thinking about prioritizing and communicating, the best way to use those is to use technology. And you mentioned MPIs, and it's evolved dramatically because you're not only just posing a solution or a problem and then a solution, you're actually communicating in the form that the customer chooses,
Yeah.
whether that's through text. We're all busy, right? So text is more common. Sometimes it's something viral like a video. a short video clip. And more times than not, I, as a customer, and I'm sure you're similar, I want to go to my dealership, pay for my services on my phone, handle everything virtually, and just come in and pick up my car. So what's changed? When we think about what we did, why we did it, when we want to see you next, the 3 Ws at the end of the delivery or at the RO review, that has to be done prior to my arrival in many cases. Why? Because we're busy, right?
Yeah.
And we're used to living in that virtual, fast paced life where we can buy shoes online, right? We can buy anything we want online, and the next day it arrives.
Right.
So we want to create that experience in the service drive without losing connection to the person.
Yeah.
That's what I think has changed.
Yeah. No, that's great insight. I like that a lot. Final question, Joe, is if you were advising a dealer group looking at planning for 2026 and really beyond, what's the first leadership discipline that they should strengthen that will maximize their chances of protecting their customer base and customer retention?
The first leadership they should invest in is their people, is invest in a development strategy that brings the team members along with their core values and their culture, that gives them the tools to be successful. We can no longer plug and play in 2026. You have 5 generations in the workforce, first time in history.
Wow.
What's even more challenging is not just the generational change. You have a neurodivergent generation in the workforce.
Yeah.
And so the way you interact with those people are much more unique. We don't, the old command and control leadership style isn't as effective as it might have been during trial times. And the reality is, I just watched a great episode on Think Again, and they were talking about an organizational psychologist. I'll try to make this quick. Was talking about the climate and the business climate is radically different than anything it's ever been. Because we have so many of these external drivers that are happening in our workforce, and we're not giving our team members the proper tools to understand how to act and engage in this very different business climate. That's what's happened rapidly. And when you think about all technology like AI, there's a place for that. There's a place for technology. And what I think it should do is augment your development of your people, support them, give them the tools to be able to do that effectively. But it shouldn't replace that human engagement altogether.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Boy, you've given us so much to think about, Joe. We could stay on there for hours, digging deeper into so many of these things that we've just touched the surface on. If any of our listeners would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, the best way is through our website at traverconnect.com. You can find me on there, or you can catch me on LinkedIn. I'm usually post every day, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Joseph Clementi. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn as well. I love to expand our community and our reach. So thanks for having me, Bill. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely, Joe. It's been great to have you. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Retention Roadmap, navigating service success for new car dealerships. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.